We consider gold as an alternate currency. It's just a different currency to park some of their liquidity. What a lot of people don't realize is just how small the physical market is in precious metals.
Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Doug Hudson.
I'm Scott Wood.
Welcome Tarek Saab, president and co-founder of Texas Precious Metals. Come on.
Here we go.
Hey, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here. Thanks for making time for us. Where are you sitting right now?
I am up in Idaho, just north of Coeur d'Alene.
Is that where do you live there?
I do, yeah. I actually, so I lived in Shiner, Texas for 7 years to build the company down that way. And my wife and I, we have a love for the mountains and the lakes and the skiing and the hiking. So we moved up here to the panhandle of Idaho, right between Montana and Washington. And it's beautiful and we love it. And I kind of commute back and forth a couple times a month, head back to Texas and do business meetings and so forth.
You're running Texas Precious Metals from Idaho.
Come on,
Idaho is kind of the Texas of the North, so we still wear our cowboy hats.
How far are you from Hayden Lake?
Not far at all.
Yeah,
about 30 minutes.
We have a longtime client and friend who lives on Hayden Lake, so I've been there a handful of times. Yeah, it's amazing.
But have you played the Island Green where you take a boat to?
I have, yes.
And did you hit the green the first time?
All water. All your listeners to come to visit Coeur d'Alene. It's one of the hidden gems in the country. One of the few places where you can be, on the beach in the summer and skiing in the winter and everything in between. Phenomenal hunting. I mean, it's God's paradise up here.
That's great.
How long have y'all been up there?
We moved up here in 2019 before COVID.
Oh, wow.
Before it was normal to work remotely. But yes, we've been up here a little over 5 years and we've really loved it.
Well, Tarek, how'd y'all find it? Is you or your wife from that area, or how did y'all discover it?
Gosh, it's quite the story. So my wife is from Fort Worth. My first job out of college was with Texas Instruments. So I've had a long history with Texas. I spent most of my adult life in Texas before moving up here to Idaho.
Were you there at Central and 635?
Exactly, Forest Lane.
Yeah, right Forest Lane. Come on.
Yeah, and I lived in the village like every other college grad.
Oh boy!
So, yeah,
if you're listening to the podcast, go to Google and type in the Village Apartment Complex. It's legendary and it was groundbreaking in the country. No way. So you did your time in the village.
I did my time, and my wife and I. It's kind of a long story, but so I worked for TI for 5 years. I lived in Dallas for a year. Went to Silicon Valley for a couple years. Came back to Dallas. Was on The Apprentice with Trump. Came off of that show. My wife and I got really interested in. I should say more me than my wife, but I got really interested in just the nature of money. Why does the dollar have value? My degree is electrical engineering. I grew up in a lower income household, had no experience to finance at all. So kind of went on this, I call it my homeschooling journey of, the history of finance, and kind of landed on precious metals, got really interested in gold and silver. This was right before the great financial crisis. And so started a gold brokering company, which ultimately, without getting into a lot of details, led me to South America. Lived in Argentina for just under 3 years in a town called Bariloche. Bariloche is sort of the Coeur d'Alene of South America. They're both at like the 33rd degree parallel. They are both, right on the mountain, right in the mountains. Obviously, Bariloche is in the Andes and Coeur d'Alene is in the Rockies, and skiing, hiking, coffee, beaches, chocolate, like all that good stuff. So we fell in love with it there. I actually was doing a lot of brokering for the Casper family. We decided to start a hedge fund. We came up with the concept of Texas Precious Metals. The company took off and ended up moving back to Texas, to Shiner in 2012. And so it's a long way of answering your question.
No, it's not. What a journey. There's a thousand conversations in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was looking I love Texas. I mean, I feel like Texas is a part of me and has been a part of my journey in a profound way. But there's something about the mountains that I'm attracted to versus South Texas brush country, and it's just more of a lifestyle thing. So
that resonates so well.
That would resonate with a lot of Texas, and which is why, like, Vail, Beaver Creek, all those mountains, they call it Texas, Northwest.
That's right.
A lot of Texans have found their vacation and safe place there.
So where were you born?
I was born just south of Boston and grew up in Massachusetts.
So how'd you get here initially?
Yeah, you couldn't pick a place more polar opposite to Texas. My dad is an immigrant from Lebanon. My mom is first generation Portuguese. And when I went to college, they said, you basically have to be a doctor or an engineer because you need to have a good solid job.
That's what we do. Yeah.
That's right. And so I got my electrical engineering degree, and I had interned with a semiconductor company called Analog Devices, which was in Boston.
Yeah.
And I thought that I was going to go work for Analog Devices, but the year that I was graduating was 2001. So this is right before the whole crash, right before 9/11. I was interviewing, actually it was late 2000, and I had offers from IBM, Texas Instruments, Analog Devices, and a few others. And when I came down to Dallas and met the people at TI, I just fell in love with the company. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the city. And I said, I just felt called to be there.
Yeah.
So after graduation, I hopped in the truck, packed all the belongings, and came down to Dallas. And honestly, 3 times in my life I've moved back to Texas because I have really, I loved it so much.
Yeah.
There's so much about Texas that I think is really unique. And growing up in Massachusetts, which is it's my home. I love Massachusetts.
It is what it is. We understand.
It is what it is, but it's a cold culture. It's a really cold culture. I never shot a gun, never had a riding lawnmower, never
shot a gun and a riding lawnmower. That is epic right there. What a phrase.
So, it was, I grew up in a city with tenement buildings and, 1 tree on my street. So I always say, like, when I moved down to Texas, especially when I moved to Shiner, it was a profound transition for me because Massachusetts is known for its scholasticism and academics, 60 colleges in a 30-mile radius. We study Shakespeare and the arts and English and literature and all that kind of stuff. And I got an outstanding education there, but I didn't learn very many life skills. I don't feel like, as it relates to, the stuff that guys in South Texas can do. I moved to South Texas and they were shooting deer and eating it for dinner and fixing their truck. And, a guy's got to build a shed. Well, we'll, barn raise it and over the weekend. And it's like, wow, these guys can do everything. They can't spell great, but gosh, they can do everything. So yeah, culturally it was very impactful, and got into woodworking and working with your hands. And, that kind of actually ties to Casper Companies, because Casper Companies is a 125-year-old family-owned business that, was built on the backs of guys who are just incredible machinists and metal workers. And, Casper Companies invented the shopping cart, and 90% of all newspaper racks in North America were manufactured there. And they owned ranch hand truck accessories for, 20 years before they sold it. So, for me, it was like a really big culture shock and a great learning experience. And that's why I love Texas.
So,
gosh, we're gonna have to go like onesie twosies here. You go first.
All right. So you were at TI for 5 years. You graduate from college, move to Texas, go to work at TI. You're there for 5 years, and then what was next?
Well, The Apprentice was next. What happened was...
Did you get fired?
I did. Yeah, I was the 12th
on TV,
on television, on NBC, in front of 12 million people.
I would appreciate another opportunity.
You have a good day, you have a bad day, you're a wonderful leader, and a great leader also has to know how to be led. and you don't know how to be led, Tarek, you're fired.
How many was it down to when you were fired?
There were 6 left when I was fired. And then I actually was invited back to help the guy who actually won. So I was on 12 out of the 15 weeks. But I almost
why did he
got
fire
fired
you?
just about every week. So
Why did he fire you? What did he say? Why did he fire you?
It was a double firing. So I was fired at the same time as someone else. And we were just bickering in the boardroom. And I think he had had enough of the bickering. I try to explain to people, we filmed 15 episodes in 49 days, and every single episode is a monumental task that should take, 3 months to handle. And they gave us like 48 hours and we weren't eating. We were running around like crazy. We were doing all the film production stuff, the interviews. It was in like downtown New York City, and it was like paparazzi, and we're like all kinds of stuff was going on, and you weren't sleeping, you weren't eating. It was high stress, high stakes, boardroom kind of stuff. So it foments a lot of tension and exhaustion. And by the time that I was fired, I was like ready. I was ready for the break, and then I got brought back 9 days later. So it was something else.
It's incredible. Okay, so with The Apprentice.
So we don't have time to go into how you apply to The Apprentice and why that was even a thing, but unless it's a quick story. But so you leave TI, you go do The Apprentice thing. That's a 3-month gig or whatever, and then what?
Yep. Yeah, and actually we filmed it, and it didn't air until 6 months later. So I went back to TI.
Okay.
When I was gone, nobody knew where I was. Everybody had to sign NDAs, and so a lot of people at TI thought that I was on medical leave. My family thought I was away in China on business, which wasn't abnormal for what I was doing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it was pretty nuts. Just the quick story is that Mark Burnett and the production crew came, and they went around to Fortune 500 companies and had open casting calls. I'd never seen the show. My buddy asked me to go try out. One thing led to another. And I found out I'd never seen the show. And I found out like I'm on the show, and 3 weeks later I was in Trump Tower. So
holy cow.
The experience was pretty wild.
Incredible.
But, I came off of the show, and the way I looked at it is I said, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I'm in all the magazines. Things are, it's a widely popular show. Let me start my own company. I always wanted to start my own company. What kind of company can you start in 3 months with like no preparation? So I started a t-shirt company called Lionheart Apparel with my best friend, and the company took off really well for the first couple of years until we hit the great financial crisis, and then it really petered out. I mean, it was tough for everybody at that time. All the while, once I went off and started my own company, that's really where I started really getting interested in finance, not only, corporate finance and building balance sheets and income statements and understanding sort of like the inner workings of how to be an entrepreneur, but just broadly, understanding economics and, why is the economy, seemingly collapsing here, and what are driving interest rates, and help me understand, CLOs and all these kind of questions that I had ultimately came back to the dollar, and, why does the dollar have value in it? And it led me down what I call, the yellow brick road to gold. And at the time, I think gold was $700 an ounce, and silver was maybe $10 an ounce. And, I started accumulating personally. I got really interested in it. I had a friend who was a German investor who had a large stockpile of metal. He was looking to liquidate. He wasn't getting good bids. He asked me to help him figure out a way to get better bids during the great financial crisis on this metal. I slapped up a very inexpensive $12 GoDaddy website and sent out a press release. Trump alum fired up about gold and silver. And boom, we were out of all of his metal in like 24 hours. And
wow.
I guess I'm in the metals business. So started doing gold brokering.
So is this 2008? Is this 2000?
This is 2008. Yeah, 2008. Okay. It was like the one business that was doing great was precious metals, because there was a lot of
the world was ending.
Yeah. So got interested. I started working with that German investor. He was doing forestation work in Paraguay. I lived in Paraguay for like 8 months, moved to Argentina, as I mentioned, came back to Texas in 2012. Jason Casper and I had co-founded Texas Precious Metals. I say to a lot of young aspiring entrepreneurs, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. The day that we launched Texas Precious Metals, gold and silver went on their historic rise in 2011. Silver was at $50 an ounce. Gold topped at $1,900 an ounce. We were one of the only games in town as a company, having any physical metal. Something that a lot of people don't realize is that precious metals are, they're a manufactured widget. So there are constraints on getting physical supply based on what the mints can produce or what the throughput is at the refineries. And so, in times where there's huge demand can increase overnight by a factor of 50x. Well, the mints can't keep up with that. And so it creates these supply demand imbalances, and the supply demand imbalance is reflected in the premium. And so it was interesting. Like we launched, all of this physical metal was sort of wiped out in the industry, and we were one of the only companies that had any metal. We then also found ourselves situated smack dab in the middle of the Eagleford Shale. And, all of this mailbox money was coming in to all these South Texas ranchers who were looking for ways to deploy capital. So we had this initial momentum, and we built our whole brand around Texas, the changed a few things about the industry and did some novel and innovative things. We pioneered next day air shipping, so free shipping anywhere in the country, 40-pound silver monster boxes that are $30,000 a box. We were shipping overnight, fully insured, for free. We would never forward sell products. So if we didn't have it, we wouldn't sell it. And so whenever we had products in stock, people were coming to us because they knew that it was going to ship. We guaranteed shipment over 3 business days. So we were doing a lot of novel things because the precious metals industry at that time had not really been able to embrace the e-commerce revolution, where all of the brick and mortar stores were historically where, all the commercial or the retail transactions were happening, whether it was clothing or precious metals. Clothing and books and everything else moved online, but precious metals didn't, because there were a lot of constraints in terms of how to do it safely and swiftly. So we along with a couple other companies, really kind of pioneered this online move towards retail precious metals shipping to all 50 states. We had a really strong concentration in Texas, but shipped everywhere. And so fast forward to today, we're a $1 billion business and one of the largest in the world. So it's been quite the whirlwind.
This is so fascinating. How did the Casper family, did they get started in physical gold and silver, and then you and the Casper family met through your brokerage? Did you help educate? Did you bring physical gold? How did that, what's the genesis? Take us down that road a little deeper of Texas Precious Metals and the Casper family and you.
Yeah, so the Casper family, they're 5th generation, and the 3rd generation was a gentleman named Don Casper. Everybody called him Daddy Don. And his philosophy, the whole Casper philosophy, is a very kind of Texan philosophy in the sense that very, very conservative family. So never took on a lot of debt, could have totally, juiced the corporation. The corporations, we have 4 platform businesses, about 500 employees. And over the years, they could have taken on a lot of debt and expanded the company, expanded operations, but they were always very conservative. And so where did their capital go? The capital was reinvested back into the manufacturing businesses. They would buy land with the capital. They owned, minority shares in some local banks, and they would buy precious metals and ammo and guns and all the things that Texans buy, right? And so Don Casper had been buying from an outfit, and Jason, the now CEO of Casper Companies, was in his late 20s, and he felt like the premiums that his grandfather was paying were just so astronomical. So he reached out to a few friends in Dallas, said, "Hey, anybody know anybody in the precious metals business?" Well, this is one of those sliding doors moments. I had met a gentleman in Dallas at a wine and cheese party. Gave him my card. I'd been gold brokering for 3 weeks. He had held on to it. 2 years later, Jason is asking his friends, and the guy's like, "Oh yeah, I know a guy in the precious metals business." So at the time I was living in Argentina, I ended up having a Skype friendship. If people remember Skype,
Of
right? We,
course.
we would Skype back and forth. Jason and I talk about markets, and I started becoming the gold broker for the Casper family. And when Jason decided to launch his hedge fund, and we knew that we wanted to have some exposure to gold in it, the downside to gold for many is that gold can be a dead asset with like a negative carry cost, meaning that it's not producing a dividend and you have to store it and so forth. So we decided to kind of merge forces, the Casper family with all their capital and all my experience doing the brokering, and turn that physical gold in the hedge fund and have it produce a dividend for us. So we were using the precious metals company to churn through the metal and derive an income stream, while maintaining long exposure in the underlying asset. So we were just buying and replacing, and churning. And then that just expanded from there. And we, expanded into silver and developed this whole e-commerce platform. And eventually the company became bigger than the hedge fund. So, that's how the
Wow.
Caspers kind of got into this.
What year was the company formed?
2011.
Okay. And this week or last week, gold hit its all-time high. Is that correct?
Today, in fact, I
Yeah.
woke up and gold
3,045.
3,050. Yeah.
3,000. It hit 50. Yeah. When I checked a few minutes ago, it was
Close to it.
3,045.
So obviously that means business is good for you or not?
Business is great for us in either direction, is how I would describe it. So the key for us always is volatility. And when there's no volatility, both in the metals market or in the market at large, that tends to be when business is slowest. So, when Trump was elected in his first term from 2017 to 2019, interest rates were low. There was no volatility in equities. There was a lot of people putting money into Bitcoin and real estate and all these different ventures. So the metals market was really the physical market especially was really in kind of a depression because there was just no volatility. And if you look at the chart during during his first 3 years prior to COVID, gold and silver are trading in such a tight range that there was not a lot of movement. Now, during COVID, if you remember, prices of metals collapsed with everything else because there was this rush to liquidity. And when that happened, our business was booming. And it doesn't matter if the prices are falling, people are buying. If the prices are rising, people are buying. They just need to be moving.
Yep.
And so, I think so. Right now, business is great. What we're seeing that I think is a little bit interesting, just sort of a little inside baseball in the industry, is during COVID and in the immediate aftermath of COVID, there was just a lot of retail buying, a lot of prepping, and that was consistent with a lot of other businesses that performed well during that period, like firearms and ammo and dry food and everything else. But what we're seeing today is a lot of institutional buying. So we're getting a lot of family offices, RIAs, large brokerage firms. People are looking to park, some of their capital into what we consider gold as an alternate currency. It's just a different currency to park some of their liquidity. So it's been very active, and I'm sure you've seen gold a lot in the news with the carry trade going back and forth from London to New York, and all the metal that is inbound into the United States, and the impact that's had on lease rates, and the impact on the futures market, which went from backwardation to contango. Like, there was all kinds of action that was happening as a result of a lot of the tariff language. So it's been very active.
So how would you, just while we're on the topic for a minute, give us your assessment? You kind of just did, but kind of give us where you think things might be headed here for the next 6, 9, 12 months with gold or metals pricing in general.
I'll answer that in a couple of ways. The first, my background is more on the technical side. So I look at the charts, and as a technician, what my perspective of what happened from 2011 to about 2019, 2020 is that we just went into this huge consolidation phase in gold. And if you look at the chart, it's just this gigantic base. We went from 2001 to 2011, and it was a straight shot. We went right from 9/11. We went from actually even prior to 9/11, the Y2K crisis, 9/11, great financial crisis, and then all the way up to 2011 where we peaked. And that was an enormous increase in price. Gold went from about $300, $400 an ounce to almost 2,000. And my view of that is the market had to digest that growth, and it was a long digestion. So we went from this, multi-decade super cycle into this long, drawn-out consolidation period. With ultimately what happened was it was a 50% pullback in the price of gold from about 1900 down to roughly about 1050, and then it worked its way back up. Following COVID, when gold finally breached that prior high, the sense was in the industry that this is very, very early stages of a new super cycle. And as we were closing above that 2100, 2200, personally, I started getting long the metals complex because to me, what I'm seeing, at least in the charts, is that this is the beginning of another wave higher. And I think it's a multi-year, possibly a decade level type move in the metals market. I would tell you that is not consensus in our industry. I know many in our industry who have a much more sort of tepid view of metals, but that is what I am seeing. On the more sort of fundamental side, in terms of everything that's happening in the news or that we have seen over the first 3 months, a lot of the movement of metal from London to New York, out of the coffers of the LBMA into New York City, that is being identified as the sort of the tariff trade. That there are a lot of banks who are making commitments on futures contracts who want to pull metal in because of the prospect of needing to actually deliver the metal to whoever the end buyer is. I think there's some of that. My sense, and I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I think it's more likely than not there are some extremely large institutional buyers that want to hold physical. And what a lot of people don't realize is just how small the physical market is in precious metals. It's a tiny market. So just to give you some numbers, the entire commodities exchange prior to this big tariff trade had about 300 million ounces of standing silver. Okay, 300 million ounces of silver is like $9 billion, which is a big number, but it's not a big number. If you have a big player that wants to come in and have $1 billion in physical, it's not that easy to actually source that quantity of metal, especially in a commodity like silver, which is heavy and very difficult to move and difficult to store, et cetera. Our depository in Texas has about 100 million ounces of silver. It's kind of a hidden gem. Not a lot of people know that there's a facility with that quantity of metal in it. And we have had to use technology to handle this quantity of metal. We use autonomous robots to actually move pallets and specialized racking systems just to be able to handle the metal, to be able to do the liquidations. People don't understand just how difficult it is. For every 30,000 ounces of silver, which is one pallet, a pallet weighs 1 ton, and the value of that, the nominal value, is only $1 million. So every $1 million worth of silver that is purchased has to get moved, has to get stored, and it's incredibly bulky and incredibly difficult. Gold, less so, but there are not a lot of standing inventories on gold, because if you're financing gold, it can get very expensive to hold standing inventories. We have a lot of gold in our facility, and we leverage our leasing relationships with our counterparty banks to hold a lot of that gold. But as lease rates increase, it gets costly. So, you're constantly managing how much standing inventory do I want to have at any given time relative to the carry cost of that. And all of those considerations play into kind of the size of the available market of gold. And I just don't think people really really understand how little metal there is in the world. The old adage is that all of the gold in the world can fit in 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So I think that's sort of where we are today.
Do you agree with
Broadly,
that statement?
I think that's pretty accurate. They say that all of the mined gold in the history of the world is about, I think it's 200,000 tons. And I've heard estimates that like standing inventories of gold, if you add up all the central banks and all the futures markets and everything, is about 50,000 tons. So yeah, I mean, I think that sounds accurate to me. There's just not a lot of it, and there's not a lot of new discoveries being found. The new mining discoveries have declined. The gold mining stocks have been atrocious for 10 to 15 years. So there hasn't been a lot of new capital going into new discoveries. So I think all of that is a setup. I'm not saying rush out and buy gold tomorrow. I'm just saying that it is a backdrop or a setup. When there is demand, it creates these dislocations. I say when there is demand because, like I said, there wasn't demand for about a decade, from 2011 to 2020. So you weren't really feeling the supply demand constraints. But I'm sensing and I'm feeling a lot of that now, particularly as there has been a move globally to become a little bit more isolationist, and it gets harder and harder for material to flow intra-country.
Well, and I also think there's this, we're beginning at probably the very beginning stages to sort of look at deficits. And I mean, we've had deficits for a long time, but there's this sort of concern about where we are from a deficit perspective and our ability to continue to finance. And then, the safe haven has always been gold. And so, I feel like there's just this shifting in how people are thinking about where we are in the economic cycle, sort of macro view. And that could affect gold also.
Yeah, I think a question that we talk about a lot internally at the company is how is the global economy changing? I think we've been very fortunate that the global economy has been pretty consistent since World War II. I mean, there haven't been a lot of big changes. I've grown up in an era where the stock market's been up and to the right, and we've been the world superpower, and things have been largely stable. There haven't been been brush fire wars, but not a lot of big conflagrations. And I hope and I pray that that's the case for a long time, but history would suggest that that's not the case. And ever since COVID, I feel like the markets have been in a state of flux, or in a state of inquiry as to what is to happen as we kind of navigate these new waters, whether that is the political waters or the geopolitical waters. And I feel with this Trump's second go round here that things feel a whole lot different than the first round as far as the volatility. And it feels like there's an economic revolution that is taking place. It might not happen fast, but it feels like it's happening piecemeal, whether it's the tariffs or the relationships with our neighbors or talks of buying Greenland, or the wars in 2 different zones with Russia and Ukraine, and all of the stuff happening in the Middle East. It just feels like things are changing. Now, it may revert to the way that it was in the 1990s, and things are copacetic, and that's great. But I think that there are many people who are starting to prepare for what could be a heightened era of volatility over the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, well said.
Couple questions. Did I infer from your comment a few minutes ago, is it your speculation that some very big institutions are either for the first time or significantly taking a stake in physical metals?
Correct. Either institutions or individuals. So, how many individuals have net worths north of 10 billion. They're quite a large number
Yep.
these days.
And we can name a bunch of them right here. Yep.
Exactly. And so if one of those individuals wants to say, for my entire net worth, I want a 5% allocation of gold just because of concerns I have about what's going on in the world. That's $500 million. $500 million of gold of silver, as an example, is 5% of all of the standing inventories in the commodities exchange. Like it doesn't take a large amount of money to have a material impact on the physical availability of metal. And so it could be large family offices, it could be some corporations, it could be large individuals or individuals with large balance sheets.
And if they want 500 million in silver, how many semi trucks is that? Best guess.
Yeah, a million and a half ounces of silver on the top of my head. That's about 3 semis.
Wow.
Yeah, because you can only fit 600,000 ounces of silver on a semi because of the weight.
So let's get like practical for a minute.
Go.
Okay. So
wait, I take that back. I think it's actually more like 30 semis.
3.5. 3 didn't sound.
Yeah, I know it's
Hey,
about 30
Somebody's going to
semis.
math check us, which is fine. I'm going to go with the over. I think it's more like 30.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it is about 30 semis. Sorry.
So when
It's
I see a buddy have 2 semis pull up to his house, so
something's up.
uh,
All right. So just for the average, retail, call them investor, call them person interested in acquiring a little bit of gold, a little bit of silver. What's your advice to, our clients who, our clients range from, sort of 5 million of liquidity up to, $500 million of liquidity. But let's just say somebody wants to go buy, a 1% position in gold. They want to put $500,000 into gold or $1 million into gold. Practically speaking, how would they do that?
Yeah. So
is this where we put your phone number 1-800?
That's right. In all seriousness, one of the things that has made us successful as a company, and I've said this to a lot of college students who are thinking about building businesses and so forth, but we don't want to sell our name is Texas Precious Metals, and I always say I don't want to sell the precious metals, I want to sell the Texas. And what I mean by that is I don't want to convince somebody to buy or sell precious metals. That's not my shtick. I'm not a doom and gloomer. I'm not saying the world's going to end, go out and buy gold. But when people decide that they do want to buy precious metals, we want them to feel comfortable to buy from us. And that's really been our whole kind of go-to-market strategy. That's why you're not going to see us like on late night talk radio hawking coins that are, collectibles and things like that. And that's a good segue into my advice. And the advice that I give to my closest friends and family is this: gold is gold, silver is silver. Buy it for the least possible premium that you can. And at the end of the day, it's worth what it's going to melt for. And where a lot of people go wrong when they go to buy precious metals is they will, find one of these precious metals companies and they'll sell them this, coin that has $100 premium or $150 premium. And I always say that it's better to put the money that you're putting into that premium, put it into the metal and pay the smallest possible premium. So for the higher net worth clients, I always recommend like gold kilo bars, or if you want something that's a little bit more divisible, 10 ounce gold bars or 1 ounce gold bars, things that are relatively inexpensive and as close to the spot price of gold as you can get. That's my number one piece of advice. The same for silver. You're always going to have to pay a premium because there's always a manufacturing cost to manufacture that physical unit and to ship it and to store it and so forth. But you don't want to pay a lot there. The second thing is we have a depository. This is where I will talk my book here a little bit. We have one of the largest depositories in the world. We're the largest single insured facility by Lloyd's of London in the world. And so our higher net worth clients, I do recommend to store in a facility like ours because it's fully insured. We have a full 6-member SWAT team on site. advanced technology, lasers. I mean, it's like mission impossible in the facility, and the storage rate is very, very low annually to have your metal there secured, annually audited. And I think perhaps even the biggest advantage is that you have access to an enormous amount of liquidity. You can pick up the phone and sell your gold, and we're T+0, T+1 on liquidation to wire funds to your account. For those clients that may be listening that want a little bit of gold and not a lot, maybe it's less than $50,000 worth of gold, then you might have a case for keeping it at your house, or in a bug out bag at the ranch, or what have you, or give as gifts and things of that nature. And in those cases, we do have some like collectibles where we just did a partnership with Texas A&M. So we're going to be launching a whole series of Texas A&M coins. We just did a partnership with Professional Rodeo and NFR. So we're going to have a whole suite of coins for that. So we do some fun commemorative stuff, and it's great, to give gifts, at Christmas and things like that. But for the higher net worth guys, stay away from the hefty premium product.
All right, I got to have you tell a story. And again, we'll edit this around. Jason told me the story on the phone a couple of weeks ago. Tell me about the client who uniquely stored their silver, and it was all painted black. You know the story I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
So, will you just? So my question on the podcast will be, Tarek, tell me a funny story about. Yeah, this stuff takes up a lot of space. How am I going to store $1 million of silver?
Yeah, so we had this experience early on, and when we launched Texas Precious Metals, where we had this client who was looking to liquidate all of this metal that they had inherited, and the metal came in. It was these 1,000-ounce silver bars. They're bricks. They're 70-pound silver bars. They're bank bars, and they were all painted completely black. And we get these bars, and we're looking at like, what is this, and why are they painted black? And the person told us that their dad was paranoid about anybody knowing where his silver was, so he painted them black, and he lined his driveway with all of these silver bricks that were painted black, because he thought, who would possibly suspect that I'd put all my silver in the driveway?
Unbelievable.
There's a cliche, is there not? Hide it in plain sight.
What was the value of all that?
Gosh, at the time, I mean, silver was, it was about $35,000 per bar. And I forget how many bars, maybe 20 bars, 25 bars.
Holy cow.
I mean, not an insignificant amount of money.
That's unbelievable. So funny.
And I won't even say the state that I was told that this was in, unless people just start driving around neighborhoods looking for pavers in the driveway. Tarek, just for a minute, let's talk about how many team members at Texas Precious Metals?
We have 80 full-time right now.
Okay. As you operate your business, what are you all working on? What are strengths of the organization? What are some opportunities to get better in the organization?
Yeah, so I've always said that our strength and what our greatest value proposition is to the market is speed. We use the Top Gun adage, we have a need for speed. And we have our employees will walk down the hallways with the high five, right? The Tom Cruise high five. We have a need for speed. And so everything that we do is about getting faster for the client experience. So when they order, we want to ship out metal quickly. We want to liquidate quickly. We want to process quickly, so that especially in our business, where there tends to be a lot of anxiety because it's a lot of money that is getting transacted. If I'm sending you $500,000, like I want to make sure that my metals on the move are getting deposited. So we've done a great job at leveraging technology to get faster. We use in our depository, as an example, we use everything from barcoding and RFID and robots and all kinds of unique tools and devices to take our business to the next level. And I will preface this by saying that that a lot of the classic storage companies, who I won't name, in the industry, are still operating like it's 1980, and still in some cases even using fax machines. So we've really kind of carved out a niche there. Things that we're working on. I was actually just talking to the leadership team about this today. Change can be very difficult as human beings. And once we're locked into a routine and we get comfortable, it's really hard to then rip apart that routine and change and work on getting better. And so the things that I work on a lot with our folks is you don't want to have perpetual change and feel like you're constantly on the flywheel, and you don't feel like you're really establishing gains. But we talk a lot about milestones, and it's like, okay, well, what is the next milestone that we want to hit? And then once we hit that milestone, let's level out, build the operation, and then build off of that plateau into the next phase. So you have this continual growth, but not continuous. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a difference between the two. So as an example, one recent thing is we originally built our building. It was supposed to last us for 10 years, and it's 37,000 square feet, and it lasted us about 8 months. So we had to build another building to get us to about 54,000 square feet. And that was a big challenge and required a lot of change. And we had set up all of our racking and then had to tear it all down and build it up into a different configuration. And so there was a lot of that was happening. But the feeling of achievement once we went through the change and created this new plateau, I think is very fulfilling for the organization because they can see the results and the fruits of their labor.
Mm-hmm. And very tangible too, because it's like this physical movement of the new structure and new building and re-racking and all the things.
That's right.
Can Doug and I come take a tour of the facility anytime? Okay.
Please. No, we love to show it off.
Well, Tarek, that's how, when we first got to know you all a little bit, we want to bring some clients and do a tour. And then I hear there's a brewery nearby that might even be making
the street.
They might even be making bourbon at some point very soon as well. So
yeah, the hospitality suite at Spetzel Brewery is definitely a destination location. We enjoy taking our clients there.
That'd be fun.
Hey, tell us real quick. A sign above your head says Y'all Street with maybe a cool logo. Maybe show us that logo up close. Can you show us that logo?
Sure.
And what is this?
Yeah, so we are about to launch Y'all Street TV, and this is a little image of Dallas and with kind of little bullhorns underneath it. And this has become a commonly used expression, and we're excited about the Texas Triangle. 8th largest economy in the world. We're getting the New York Stock Exchange down here. We have the Texas Exchange that's coming up. A lot of technology is moving into the area. So we're launching in conjunction with our website a streaming media platform to interview people in business, but all different types of business, from entertainment to athletes to real estate and oil and gas. And I've always been fascinated living in Texas by the guy in Dallas, the guy in Houston who's, suit and collar during the day and phenomenal at business. And then on the weekends, he's out at the ranch and the skid steer, moving dirt around and shooting deer. And the range and the breadth of that experience and everything in between and everything that represents, from academics and white collar life to blue collar life, working with your hands and being very capable, is something that I'm attracted to. And I think in all walks of life, as we kind of explore Y'all Street, I'm interested in understanding what drives the business aspect of music, entertainment, metals, finance, and trying to understand the psychology behind those that have been very successful in their spaces. So that's what Y'all Street is for me.
That's awesome.
It's incredible. Tarek, so enjoyable, fascinating.
We may need to do a part 2.
100% we need a part 2. Just grateful for what a journey you have walked. And then obviously the combination with the Casper family and what you guys have built at Texas Precious Metals. So Thank you for making time for us on Decision Points.
Truly a pleasure. Thank you so much.